The 2025 budget, a time for reflection, aspiration, and fiscal responsibility. Or, in the case of India's latest financial blueprint, a time for a healthy dose of cynicism. The budget reveals a foreign policy approach as nuanced as a Bollywood dance number, balancing regional anxieties with global ambitions. The Ministry of External Affairs saw its budget slightly trimmed, but more funds are earmarked for sprucing up embassies abroad and streamlining passport services. As India steps onto the world stage, it does so with a wink and a nod, a touch of realpolitik masked by a charming smile. But behind the facade of diplomatic niceties, the budget numbers tell their own tale. A tale of cautious optimism, strategic maneuvering, and the ever-present shadow of a certain dragon-shaped neighbor. Fasten your seatbelts, dear reader, for the ride is about to get interesting. India's foreign policy, much like its bustling cities, operates on the principle of concentric circles. These circles represent varying degrees of influence and interest, with the innermost circle being the most crucial. The outermost ring may hold the allure of distant shores, representing India's global ambitions and far-reaching diplomatic efforts. But it's the inner circle, the neighborhood, that demands the most attention. This is where India's immediate strategic interests lie, and where it must maintain strong relationships. Bhutan, its landlocked neighbor nestled in the Himalayas, remains the apple of India's eye, receiving a generous boost in aid. This small yet significant nation benefits from India's focus on regional stability and development. Infrastructure projects abound, from hydropower plants to bridges, cementing a bond as sturdy as the mountains themselves. These projects not only aid Bhutan but also enhance India's strategic foothold in the region. The Maldives, those idyllic islands in the Indian Ocean, also get a financial pat on the back, a sign that recent diplomatic hiccups are water under the bridge. This support underscores India's commitment to maintaining influence in the Indian Ocean region. Nepal, Delhi's old friend and frenemy, sees its aid package remain steady. Despite occasional tensions, the historical and cultural ties between the two nations ensure a consistent relationship. Sri Lanka, still finding its feet after its economic turmoil, receives a much-needed lifeline. India's assistance is crucial for Sri Lanka's recovery and for maintaining regional stability. Bangladesh, India's neighbor to the east, whose aid remains unchanged, a silent reminder of the diplomatic chill. Despite this, the economic and cultural exchanges between the two countries continue to thrive. Myanmar, the gateway to Southeast Asia, also sees an increase in aid, reflecting shared security concerns. This aid is pivotal for both nations, addressing mutual interests in combating insurgency and fostering economic growth. Clearly, when it comes to the neighbors, India is playing a strategic game of chess, carefully calculating each move. Each piece on the board represents a nation, and every move is a step towards securing regional dominance and fostering cooperative relationships. But while the neighborhood may be India's immediate priority, the country's ambitions extend far beyond its immediate borders. India fancies itself a global player, a leader of the developing world, a voice for the voiceless. Afghanistan sees its aid package shrink, reflecting the uncertainties that plague the nation. Africa receives a modest increase in aid, a nod to growing economic and diplomatic ties. Latin America sees its aid doubled, a sign of India's desire to court new allies. The Chabahar port in Iran sees its funding remain steady, a sign of its enduring significance. The budget allocates increased funding for cultural exchanges, educational programs, and disaster relief efforts, showcasing India's commitment to global good. No discussion of India's foreign policy can ignore the dragon in the room, China. The 2025 budget, while never explicitly stating so, is clearly crafted with one eye on Beijing's next move. The increased aid to Bhutan and the Maldives is a calculated move to counter China's growing influence. The emphasis on infrastructure projects, particularly those that enhance connectivity and trade routes, is another strategic play. India's cautious engagement with Afghanistan, its strengthened ties with African nations, its outreach to Latin America. All of these can be seen through the lens of the Sino-Indian rivalry. The budget reflects a delicate balancing act, a tightrope walk between cooperation and competition. India is learning to tango with the dragon, but it's doing so with one hand firmly on its purse strings. I guess the Indian government wants to reserve its ached in for the citizens living on the motherland. The NRIs, once celebrated as the torchbearers of India's global presence, now find themselves under the microscope. The 2025 budget has decided to shower some extra attention on India's globe-trotting brethren. This attention, however, is not the kind they might have hoped for. Tax rules have been tightened, loopholes plugged, and the definition of residency expanded. The government is leaving no stone unturned to ensure every rupee is accounted for. Students, professionals, retirees, no NRI is safe from the watchful gaze of the Indian Revenue Service. The net has been cast wide and deep. Double taxation woes loom large, tax treaty benefits are under scrutiny, and the once sacred status of the NRI seems to be fading. The financial landscape for NRIs is becoming increasingly complex. The message is clear. Your heart may belong to your adopted homeland, but your rupees, dear NRI, belong to India. Is this a cynical cash grab or a long overdue measure to ensure fairness in the tax system? Opinions are divided and the debate is heated. The answer is likely a messy combination of both. The reality is nuanced, and the implications are far-reaching. One thing's for sure, the NRIs are now being reminded that when it comes to the Indian government, there's no such thing as a free lunch. The era of leniency appears to be over. Let's also investigate the curious case of shrinking aid and shiny new embassies. The same budget that preaches fiscal prudence also finds itself strangely generous when it comes to certain domestic expenditures. While the government tightens its belt in some areas, it seems to loosen it considerably in others. The budget allocates a hefty sum for the construction, renovation, and general beautification of India's diplomatic outposts across the globe. These embassies are not just buildings, they are symbols of national pride and international presence. Now I'm all for projecting a positive image abroad. A well-maintained embassy can indeed reflect a nation's stature and aspirations. But one can't help but wonder if the optics of splurging on opulent embassies while simultaneously cutting back on aid to struggling nations might be a tad unsuited. The contrast is stark and raises questions about priorities. It's a bit like wearing a designer suit to a potluck dinner and then offering to bring the cheapest bottle of wine. The gesture seems out of place and somewhat tone-deaf. The message seems to be, we're a rising power, we've arrived, we have money to spend. Yet this display of wealth is juxtaposed with the reality of limited generosity. But don't expect us to be handing it out like party favors. The priorities appear skewed, focusing on image rather than substance. In the court of public opinion, the optics of this budgetary balancing act might not play out quite as intended. The public is watching, and they are not easily convinced by mere appearances. In conclusion, this was a budget of contradictions and a future of geopolitical uncertainty lies ahead. There you have it, India's 2025 budget in all its messy, contradictory glory. A document that attempts to reconcile the country's regional anxieties with its global aspirations. It's a budget that seeks to navigate the choppy waters of geopolitics with a mix of pragmatism and ambition. Whether it succeeds in its aims remains to be seen. But one thing is for sure, the road ahead is fraught with challenges, both internal and external. The ride will be anything but boring. Stay on board the DipLab boat to sail through these murky geopolitical waters. Do like and subscribe for more world-impacting events. Thank you.